So Shachar and Mincha correspond to the Tam Shel Shachar and Tam Shel Ben Arbaim. Now Tfilas Erev Loy Matu Malat Loisa, Chazal didn't find anything that Ma'ariv corresponds to, and Mishan Loisa Stam, they taught it Stam in the Mishnah. As the Mishnah says, Hadahi de Taninon, Tfilas Ha'erev Ein Lo Keva. It doesn't have a set time, because it doesn't correspond to anything, according to this Shita. Mishal Musafin Kal Yom. Now Amar Tanchuma says, no, Oid Hi Kavu Isa Keneged Ichol Evarmu Pedarim Shahayu Misachon Gab Mizbeach Kal Laila. It also, meaning Ma'ariv, does correspond to the Tamid. What part of the Tamid? The Ichol Evarmu Pedarim, the consumption of the limbs and the fats of the karbanos, those could be burned on the Mizbeach all night. So when it says in the Mishnah, Tfilas Erev Ein Lo Keva, it doesn't mean that it doesn't correspond to anything. It means that it corresponds to these Evarim and Pedarim that are burned all night. So that means that one can have a Ma'ariv all night. And that's understanding of Ein Lo Keva. Now we're going to go on to understand Rabbi Yehuda's Shita in our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Ad Arba Shais, that a person can daven Shachars up until 4 hours of the day. So now we're going to explore two different possibilities of where Rabbi Yehuda would get his Shita from. Medivei Torah Lamed Rabbi Yehuda. Does Rabbi Yehuda learn this from the Torah? And how would he learn from the Torah? The Tanna Rabbi Shmuel taught. It says in the pasuk V'cham hashemesh v'namas, and the sun became hot and it melted. This is referring to the mun in the midbar. It would melt when it got hot outside. And the Brachot says ba'arba shais it would melt at 4 hours. Now Ata Omer ba'arba shais and el b'shei shais, you say that it would melt at 4 hours. Maybe it melted at 6 hours of the day because it's also hot at 6 hours of the day. So the Gemara says no. Kshu Omer, when it says in the pasuk Kechayim hayom, in the heat of the day, this is referring to Avram Avinu sitting outside his tent in the heat of the day. Harei sheish amor. That clearly is talking about 6 hours of the day. And we're going to see in a little bit why that's talking about 6 hours. So Hamanu Mekayim V'cham Hashemesh V'namas. What does Lashon mean? And the sun became hot and it melted. Ba'arba shais, that's referring to 4 hours of the day. Now here's where Rabbi Yehuda would learn his Shita from. Va'ad Darish and you Darshin Ba'biker. We have a Lashon of biker here and a Lashon of biker over there. Ma Ba'biker Shnemer La'alan. Just like the biker that it says over there in regards to the mun, Ba'arba shais is referring to 4 hours of the day. Af Ba'biker Shnemer Kan. So to the word Ba'biker that says over here in regards to the Tamid Shel Shachar, Ba'arba shais is referring to 4 hours of the day. That's one way of understanding Rabbi Yehuda. Now we just explain why is it that V'cham Hashemesh V'namas is referring to 4 hours of the day. However, Kechayim Hayom is referring to 6 hours of the day. So Gemara says, Ba'arba sha'in shimsha chamin v'tula karir. At 4 hours of the day, the places that are in the sun are hot and the shade is cold. Meaning, at 4 hours of the day, if you're in the shade, you're cool and you're not hot. And that's what the pasuk says, V'cham Hashemesh V'namas. The sun is hot, meaning other places that are not in the sun are not hot. Whereas V'shis shine at 6 hours of the day, shimsha chamin v'tula chamin. Not only are places in the sun hot, but also shady places are hot as well. And that's understanding the pasuk Kechayim Hayom, in the heat of the day, meaning the day is hot no matter where you are, in the sun or the shade. Now Amar Tanchuma, he argues, and he says, Ma'u Kechayim Hayom, what does that mean, the heat of the day? V'shash ein sel chalberia is referring to a time where there is no shade for anyone. At noontime, at Chatzos, the sun is directly overhead, so there is no shade, and that's why it's called Chayim Hayom. And now we're going on somewhat of a digression over here before we explore the second side of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yasa Masli B'tlas Shayin. Rabbi Yasa would daven at 3 hours of the day. Even though technically he has up until 4 hours of the day, he would daven at 3 hours. And Rabbi Chia Bar Aval Masli B'tlas Shayin, he would also daven at 3 hours of the day. However, Rabbi Rechia Chamayne Kari Kriyas Shema Umatzli Basar Tlas Shayin, he was seen saying Kriyas Shema and davening after 3 hours. The Gemara asks, how could that be? V'hataninu, we learned in our Mishnah Hakari Mikan Ve'elech Loy Hefsid, one that says Kriyas Shema after 3 hours of the day. He hasn't lost out completely. Ka'adam Shu Kari B'Torah. He at least gets schar like someone who's reading from the Torah, but he doesn't get schar like someone who said Kriyas Shema Bizman. So how could Rabbi Rechia say Kriyas Shema after 3 hours? So Neymar, we can say that Kfar Kibel Malchus Shemaim Ba'inasa, he was already Makabel Ol Malchus Shemaim in its proper time, which means he already said Kriyas Shema in its proper time before 3 hours. Now that he wants to say Shema Esrei and he wants to be Samech Gul Litfila, so he said Shema again in order to do that. But he was already Yaitse Kriyas Shema in its proper time. Now we're back to Rabbi Yehuda exploring the other potential tzad for Rabbi Yehuda's Shita. Ime Eidos Lamed Rabbi Yehuda. Maybe Rabbi Yehuda learns it from an Eidos that was said over by someone. The Ma'ir Rabbi Simon B'Shem Rabbi Shu ben Levi. Rabbi Simon said in the name of Rabbi Shu ben Levi, B'mei Malchus Yavan, in the days of the Greek kingdom. This is before Churban Abayas, when the walls were surrounded, so they didn't have a way to get animals. Hayu Mishalshal in Lahen Shtei Kupai Shel Zahav. They would lower down 2 baskets of gold. Hayu Man Lahen Shnei Talayim. The Greeks would put 2 lambs in a box and they would raise them up. Now Pamach has one time Shilshal Lahen Shtei Kupai Shel Zahav. They lowered these 2 boxes of gold. Hayu Man Lahem Shnei Gedayim, and they sent up 2 goats. And goats aren't allowed to be brought for the carbon tamid. At that time, Hakadosh Baruch Hu Eneim, Hakadosh Baruch Hu opened their eyes. He lightened up their eyes. Umatzu Shnei Talayim Mevukarim Belishkas HaTalayim. They found 2 lambs that were already pre-checked in the Lishkas HaTalayim. Now let's just pause for a second and understand what we just said. What does that mean? Lambs pre-checked in the Lishkas HaTalayim. So in the Beis HaMikdash compound, there was a room called Lishkas HaTalayim. That's where all the lambs that were designated for the carbon tamid would be sent. A carbon needed bikor, it needed to be pre-checked. We needed to make sure it doesn't have a mum. So that's where they would take the lambs from. And what we're saying over here is since they had goats and they weren't able to bring them as a Karban Tamid, Hashem opened up their eyes and they found 2 lambs wandering around the Lishkas HaToim. Now, Al Shah, in regards to that time, Heid Rabbi Yehuda bar Abba gave Eidos al Talmid Shal Shachar Shakarav ba'arba shais that the Talmid Shal Shachar was brought at 4 hours of the day. So we see that we have an Eidos that the Talmid Shal Shachar was brought at 4 hours of the day. So it's very possible that this is where Rabbi Yehuda gets his Shita from. And the Gemara concludes us over here without an answer. We don't know where Rabbi Yehuda's Shita comes from. But now we continue with a similar story. Rav Levi says, Afimei Malchus Harasha Hazais. Even in the times of this evil kingdom, referring to Rome, they would lower down 2 boxes of gold, and they would send them 2 kvasim for the Talmid Shal Shachar and Talmid Shal Bein Arba'im. However, at the end, one day, they lowered down 2 boxes of gold, and they sent up 2 chazirim, and the box that had the chazirim in them didn't even make its way halfway up the wall, until what happened? The chazir stuck its hooves into the wall, and the wall shook, and it was thrown 40 parsa from Eretz Yisrael. But at that time, the sins of Am Yisrael sealed their fate, and the Talmud was completely nullified. There was no more Talmud. And the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. And now we continue explaining. What's the reason of the Rabbanon? Why is it the Rabbanon say that the Talmid Shal Shachar is allowed to be brought up until Chatzos? So the reason is based off a pasuk. It says in the pasuk, Shnaim layom, 2 per day. What do we learn from here? Mem Daled Amud Aleph on the top, Chaluk es hayom, split the day. So up until the first half of the day, the Talmid Shal Shachar can be brought, and in the second half of the day, the Talmid Shal Bein Arba'im is brought. Now, time of Rav Yehuda, how would Rav Yehuda understand this pasuk? Shnaim layom, 2 per day, chayva layom. That means that it's a chayv to bring 2 a day. Now we have more drashas out of this pasuk. Shnaim layom, what does that mean? 2 per day. Shnei prakalitim layom, 2 advocates or 2 defenders per day. The Talmid Shal Shachar was mechaper on all the avonos of Am Yisrael that were done in that previous night, and the Talmid Shal Bein Arba'im was mechaper for the avonos done in the morning. Another drasha, Shnaim layom, shetahei shchitasan l'shem hayom, the shchita should be l'shem that day, meaning the kain is not allowed to have machshava of pigol. He shouldn't be having a machshava that I'm shechting this, but we're going to do the avodah tomorrow. We're shechting it, and we're going to do the avodah today. Another drasha, Shnaim layom, shetahei shchitasan keneged hayom, the shchita, the carbon should be opposite the day, which means in the light of the day. Hadahi the tanin and taman, that's what we learned in the Mishnah over there. Talmid Shal Shachar, Talmud in the morning, haya nishchat al karen ma'ravas tzvainis, it was shechted by the northwest corner of the Mizbeach, al tabas shniya by the second ring, keneged hayom, that's where the day was, that's where the light was. We'll explain this in a moment. And Mishal Bein Rabbayim, the afternoon Talmud, haya nishchat al karen tzvainis mizrachis, it was shechted by the northeast corner of the Mizbeach, al tabas shniya by the second ring, keneged hayom, also opposite the day, that's where the light was then. Now what does this mean? So to the north of the Mizbeach, meaning on the right side of the Hazara, there were 24 rings in the floor, each one used by a different mishmar to help hold the animal down while shechting it. So that's what we mean when we say tabas, the ring. Now in the morning, when the sun rises in the east, so the sun was shining on the northwestern corner of the Mizbeach, and that's where the Talmid Shal Shachar was shechted, because that's where the sun was. Whereas in the afternoon, when the sun was in the west already, that means that the sun was shining on the northeastern corner of the Mizbeach, so that's where the Talmid Shal Bein Arba'im was shechted. And lastly, what does Shnaim Layom mean? V'hu shehei yodeya, eze mehen nishchat b'shachris, v'eze mehen nishchat b'arves. The kohen has to know which one's going to be shechted in the morning, and which one's going to be shechted in the afternoon. We're going to stop here for the day. Pick up tomorrow with talking about mincha. For now, everyone should have a wonderful day.